Washington, not to be confused with Washington, D.C., is a state located in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. Nestled between Idaho to the east and Oregon to the south, Washington is a region of stunning natural beauty, making it a paradise for outdoor enthusiasts. The state is also notable as the birthplace of Starbucks coffee and home to two of the world's biggest tech giants, Microsoft and Amazon. But beyond its picturesque landscapes and booming tech industry, there's another side to Washington, one that often surprises visitors. When you think of Washington, you might imagine a pristine, forward-thinking state. But beneath the surface, Washington has its share of challenges, chief among them, a rising crime rate. Unlike much of the United States, where violent crime has been on a steady decline, Washington is bucking the trend in the wrong direction. Between 2020 and 2022, the overall violent crime rate across the U.S. dropped from 398.5 incidents per 100,000 people to 380.7, according to FBI crime data. Yet in Washington, the opposite occurred. The state saw its violent crime rate rise from 293.7 to 375.6 incidents per 100,000 people, a sharp increase of 81.9 incidents. This surge has earned Washington a dubious distinction. By 2024, it became the 8th most dangerous state in America. So, what kind of crimes are we talking about? For one, Washington leads the nation in theft, with a staggering 2,133 incidents per 100,000 people. The state also has the second highest rate of vandalism and property damage, with 1,001 incidents per 100,000, and ranks third in robberies, tallying 513 per 100,000 people. But what's driving this wave of crime? A key factor is the influence of organized criminal groups, especially in Seattle, Washington's largest city and economic hub. Seattle, once known for its tech innovation and coffee culture, is now grappling with a surge in gang-related violence, particularly among younger residents. It's impossible to discuss Washington's crime issue without focusing on Seattle. The city has become a hotspot for gang activity, with groups like the Black Gangster Disciple, Crips, and Bloods making their presence known. Many of these gangs exploit Washington's relatively lenient criminal justice policies. Seattle's laws are perceived as more forgiving, with lighter sentences and less likelihood of serving long-term prison time. Criminals are well aware of these loopholes, and they know how to navigate the system. Compounding the problem is Seattle's ongoing shortage of police officers, a crisis that has left the city unable to adequately address its growing crime problem. This lack of law enforcement only emboldens criminal elements, allowing gangs to operate with increasing impunity. While gang violence poses a significant problem in Washington, there's an even more insidious danger lurking in the state. Washington is home to one of the most toxic and polluted areas on the planet, Hanford Site. This isn't due to industrial smog or everyday pollution, it's much more severe. The Hanford Site, a former nuclear production complex, is a relic of the United States efforts during World War II. It was here that the production of plutonium, a key component in the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, began. Although the war ended long ago, Hanford's toxic legacy persists. The site was initially designed to temporarily store nuclear waste, with 177 underground storage tanks constructed for the purpose. However, while the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have largely recovered, Hanford remains one of the most contaminated places on Earth. Decades of nuclear production have left behind a staggering amount of radioactive waste, and the consequences are far-reaching. Currently, the U.S. Department of Energy, through its contractor Washington River Protection Solutions, is responsible for managing the cleanup of the site. Billions of dollars have been spent on attempting to contain the toxic waste, but the results have been less than reassuring. Many of the storage tanks are leaking, releasing toxic and radioactive vapors known to cause cancer, as well as severe damage to the brain and lungs. Despite the ongoing efforts, the cleanup at Hanford has reached a critical juncture. Numerous reports indicate that workers at the site have been exposed to dangerous chemicals, and many of these incidents have been kept under wraps. Worse still, the cost of the cleanup is astronomical. In 2023 alone, the official price tag for dealing with the site's radioactive waste soared to a staggering $528 billion. And at the current rate, experts estimate that it could take centuries to fully address the contamination. Even then, without effective disposal methods, the nuclear waste will remain hazardous for thousands of years. As if Washington's environmental issues weren't complicated enough, the state is also highly vulnerable to natural disasters. No matter where you live in Washington, you're likely to face risks from wildfires, landslides, floods, and other natural catastrophes. Between 1980 and 2024, Washington experienced 35 major climate or weather-related disasters, each costing more than $1 billion in damages. Wildfires, in particular, have become a frequent and devastating occurrence. Over just the last 5 years, wildfires in Washington have caused an average of $153 million in damage annually. While fires can ignite anywhere in the state, they are most common in eastern Washington and around the Cascade Mountain Range, where dry conditions are prevalent. Flooding is another major hazard, particularly in areas surrounding the Puget Sound. Much of the state's landscape consists of floodplains, and its numerous rivers carry water from melting snow and heavy rainfall down from the mountains. Most of Washington's floods are caused by river overflows, which result from intense rainstorms or rapid snowmelt. Then, there are landslides, another constant threat. Washington is one of the most landslide-prone states in the U.S., experiencing hundreds of incidents each year. The state's wet climate, combined with its steep hills and loose soil, makes it particularly susceptible to these dangerous events. While Washington is known for its cool and damp weather, the state is becoming increasingly prone to extreme heat waves, adding yet another layer of complexity to its environmental challenges. Another pressing issue that shadows Washington, particularly Seattle, is the soaring cost of living. Over the past decade, Seattle has experienced rapid population growth and economic expansion, driving the cost of living to unprecedented heights. The housing market, especially in the city center, has become so expensive that many residents struggle to afford to live there. To paint a clearer picture, the average home price in Seattle is now around $700,000. Rent for a 2-bedroom apartment averages $2,100 per month, while the typical monthly salary in Washington hovers at $4,800. This means that nearly half of a person's income is consumed by rent alone. The result? Homelessness in Washington has been steadily rising since at least 2016. The combination of skyrocketing rent and stagnant income levels is a major driver behind this alarming trend. As housing costs continue to climb, the availability of affordable housing options, particularly for low-income residents and the working class, has become increasingly scarce. This has led to widespread displacement and gentrification across many neighborhoods. According to recent data, Washington now ranks 4th in the country for its homeless population. Cities across the state, particularly Seattle, are grappling with this growing crisis, with homeless encampments and panhandling becoming more visible throughout urban areas. The strain on social services is palpable, and concerns over public safety have grown in tandem with the homeless population. While Washington has made some progress in increasing housing construction over the last decade, homeownership remains out of reach for many residents, and the homelessness crisis shows no sign of abating. Washington is also notorious for its traffic congestion, especially in Seattle. A combination of rapid population growth, limited public transportation options, and challenging geographical constraints has led to some of the worst traffic jams in the country. In 2023, the average Seattle driver lost 58 hours sitting in traffic, a number far above the national average of 42 hours. Seattle ranks in the top 10 cities in the U.S. for traffic congestion, and the reasons are clear. The sheer volume of vehicles on the road is a significant contributor. With limited public transit alternatives, most people rely on personal vehicles to commute. Furthermore, many residents who can't afford to live in Seattle's city limits are purchasing homes in the suburbs or farther afield, increasing their daily commute times. This, in turn, worsens traffic congestion as more people spend longer hours on the road to reach their jobs in the city. Despite its reputation as a progressive state, Seattle, like many other parts of Washington, remains relatively racially homogeneous, with a predominantly white population. This lack of diversity can make it difficult for minority groups to feel fully integrated into the social fabric of the city. While Washington has seen racial and ethnic diversity increase since 2020, particularly in urban centers, the state still retains a largely white demographic. In many cities across the state, the number of people of color has grown, while the white population has declined. However, despite these shifts, Washington remains a predominantly white state, and some residents from minority communities still experience feelings of exclusion or marginalization. This ongoing issue complicates Washington's image as a forward-thinking, inclusive place, especially in cities like Seattle that are perceived as progressive but remain relatively insulated when it comes to racial diversity.